Pro-Vice Chancellor, Master, Dame Stephanie, members of the advisory board of the OII, and all of our students who are here, but also all the friends and colleagues of the Oxford Internet Institute. It's an honor for me to present my inaugural lecture to you, and to do so here in the examination schools. This is a special place, and as we all know, place matters. Today I will focus on how in internet time and space, users are able to reconfigure access to resources in all sorts of new ways. And I'll describe a pattern of findings that have come out of the Oxford Internet Institute research and try to connect the dots in ways that you can see the rise of a fifth estate that's connected with the space of internet time and place. In an earlier era, printing was tied to the rise of the press as a major institution. Its subsequent growing role, in conjunction with the development of radio, television, and all the mass media, has created an independent institution in many nations, which has become known as the Fourth Estate. This has become central to almost all pluralist democratic societies. I believe it's not an exaggeration already to argue that a new form of social accountability is emerging in what I am calling the Fifth Estate. It is enabled by the growing use of the internet and related information and communication technologies. Essentially, the internet is enabling people to network with other individuals and with a vast range of information, services, and technical resources. This is being achieved in a way that can support greater social accountability, not only in government and politics, but also in other sectors. This could be important, if not more so, or as important to the 21st century as the Fourth Estate was since the 18th. Thomas Carlyle was attributed the Fourth Estate concept to Edmund Burke. According to Carlyle wrote, Burke said there were three estates in Parliament, but in the reporters' gallery yonder, there sat a fourth estate, more important far than they all. It is not a figure of speech or witty saying, it's a literal fact, very momentous to us in these times. Perhaps even more interestingly, even in the 19th century, the rise of the press led William Thackeray to refer to this Fourth Estate in ways that we might think of the internet today. He said, of the corporation of the goose quill, of the press, of the Fourth Estate, there she is, the great engine. She never sleeps. She has her ambassadors in every quarter of the world, her courtiers upon every road. Her officers march along with armies, and her envoys walk into statesmen's cabinets. They are ubiquitous. Some have argued that the internet is essentially just an add-on to the Fourth Estate, a new media, for example. The others have argued that simply bloggers form some part of a Fifth Estate. I think both views minimalize and marginalize the role of the internet. Both conceptions are tied to an overly limited notion of new digital media as being just a complementary form of news publishing. The internet is far more than a blogosphere or online digital add-on to the mass media. It is true that the internet's broad social role in government and politics may have many similarities to that of traditional media. Equally important, it also plays roles that differ from traditional media, and it opens up other institutional arenas to greater social accountability, from everyday life to science. What I'll do is try to, in this talk, I'd like to try to lay out several conflicting viewpoints on the societal implications of the internet, try to place my conception of the Fifth Estate within that context, and then review some of the research findings coming out of the Oxford Internet Institute and my colleagues and myself that paint the picture that I think is captured by the concept of a Fifth Estate. And then I'll go into some of the issues raised by those findings, such as for internet governance. I think most people in this room, perhaps you would not come here if you didn't think the internet is becoming increasingly central to many sectors of society. However, the social role of the internet remains a matter of considerable debate. Broadly, there are three contrasting views. I characterize these as an emphasis on it being simply a technological novelty, a deterministic debate over whether the internet is a technology fostering greater freedom or control, and an understanding of the internet as a network of networks which can be shaped by people to reinforce the interests of individuals or major organizations, or the networked individuals that form the fifth estate. One view might be called the Passing Fad fallacy, which has focused on the supposed ephemeral nature of the internet in comparison with other institutions and previous media. Even into the mid-1990s, many dismissed the significance of the internet. Despite evidence of a continuing growth in internet use, the Passing Fad thesis is refreshed from time to time. One of Hillary Clinton's recent advisors argued that there's a micro-trend for the new Luddites, or the micro-trend of today. I think the most dramatic instance of this was the dot-com bubble in the late 1990s. With time, however, this Passing Fad thesis has become less credible, with debate focusing on two opposing views of the implications of internet use. These see the internet as either a technology of freedom or a technology of control. Of course, the optimistic view I'd like to link with Ethiel Solapool, who coined the concept of technologies of freedom. I think Professor Noam in the front actually edited a book by the late Ethiel Solapool along this line. He regarded the internet as inherently democratic. The futurist John Nesbitt has best captured this view, perhaps in a contemporary world, where Nesbitt said, "The really powerful networks are those where every member of it experiences that they are in the center, and all the information is coming and going through us. We are the nexus, we are at the center." Many others have countered this inherently individualist, democratic notion of emerging communication technologies. They contend that institutions will adopt, design, and use the internet to enhance their control of existing institutional structures and organizational arrangements. For example, many e-initiatives, such as in the area of e-government or e-learning, are aimed at supporting and enhancing existing institutional arrangements. At the extreme, pessimists in this vein tie new technologies, from network sensors to web cameras, to the rise of a surveillance society in Britain and other nations. In response to this freedom versus control debate, others, myself included, have argued for some time that the internet can support and reinforce many different forms of networks. These connect not only in the one-to-many pattern of the mass media, but also one-to-one, many-to-many, many-to-one, and so on. Therefore, the internet can be used to support the communicative power of both institutions and individuals in many ways. Also, and I think this is the most critical point I'd like to make, is that they can become platforms for new networks of individuals that have a public social benefit that can be supported by the internet and related ICTs, such as social networking websites, mailing lists, and text messaging. Self-selected individuals can build networks that are designed and used to meet broader social objectives more than those of the purely self-interested personal networks suggested by the individualist viewpoint, which serve up the daily me and entertainment or conviviality. Networked individuals can move across, undermine, and go beyond the boundaries of existing institutions. This provides the basis for the pro-social networks that compose what I'm calling the fifth estate. They are neither personal nor institutional networks. These self-selected, internet-enabled, networked individuals often break from existing organizational and institutional networks that are themselves being transformed in internet space. The ability the internet affords individuals to network within and beyond various institutional arenas in ways that can enhance and reinforce the communicative power of networked individuals is key. The interplay of change within and between such individuals and institutional networks of networks lies at the heart of what I'm trying to argue. I think it'd be fair for you at this point to wonder if this new space is some Alice in Wonderland viewed through a looking glass, rather than an empirical phenomena organized through the network of networks we call the internet. I hope to convince you, using Burke's observation on the Fourth Estate, that the Fifth Estate, enabled within this space, is not just a witty saying nor wishful thinking, but a literal fact. The potential to create new and local global networks stems from the role that the internet and related ICTs can play in what I call reconfiguring access. Reconfiguring access to people, to information, to services and resources. The internet, for example, can reconfigure access in two different ways. First of all, it can change the way we do things, change the way we get information using the internet rather than a telephone or letter, for example. It changes the way we communicate with people, the way we obtain services and access technologies. Secondly, and more fundamentally, clearly, it changes the outcome of these activities. It changes what we know, and whom we keep in close touch with. We are also using the net to change what services we obtain, what technologies we use, and what know-how we require to use them. New ICTs, from the book to the web, can reconfigure access by changing cost structures, by expanding or contracting the geography of access, by eliminating or introducing new gatekeepers. They can reconfigure access by giving greater or lesser control to users, viewers, or readers. It's not an inherent development, but it's the unintended, accidental, and strategic choices have enabled individuals to network in internet time and space in an infinitely malleable number of ways. Understood in this way, the development of platforms supportive of a Fifth Estate is not inevitable. Instead, it has developed over time through the unpredictable interaction of choices made by many actors with different competing and complementary objectives. I'm always amused by one of the fathers of the internet who said, if I knew what the internet was today, I would not have invented it the way I did. And of course, if he had invented it the way he thought he should have, he might not have been here today. These networks can blur the boundaries of households, organizations, institutions, and nations. They enable individuals, not only institutions, to create local and global networks, as illustrated by the mobilization of political and financial support around the world for causes as varied as climate change and struggles against dictatorial state control, as we've witnessed recently in Burma. Yet, as seen in Burma, they can be suppressed, if not completely silenced. There are alternative related conceptions of my formulation of this concept. For instance, like many, I find Jürgen Habermas's seminal idea of the public sphere to be inspired, but I think it's tied to the rise of it's tied to a romantic view of the past and not able to capture the rise of an entirely new sphere of influence. The notion of an information commons and its many variants is used by many others to characterize aspects of this new internet virtual space. However, this appears to be a movement and normative prescription that has anchored more in ideology than an empirical observation of trends. The internet and web may be packed with material that is free, but they also contain much that is owned, trademarked, copyrighted, proprietary, licensed, and more. For example, the personal computer is a key component of the internet's infrastructure and is normally owned by individuals and organizations. My description of this new space is naturally rooted in my social science background, but it travels across other disciplines. It's not just social science. For instance, leading computer scientists and engineers have made similar observations. Tim Berners-Lee, an Oxford physics graduate who was a key creator of the web, and his web science colleagues speak of the web as an engineered space that creates a distributed information space. By enabling a huge range of people across the globe to reconfigure access, the internet and related ICTs have the potential to reshape the communicative power of individuals and groups in numerous ways. Of course, powerful actors and institutions, not only groups, not only individuals, can enhance their communicative power by strategically using the internet. This is shown by the increasing influence of companies anchored in cyberspace, such as Google, and the growing online presence of traditional fourth estate players like News International or the BBC. But what evidence is there for the emergence of an internet-enabled fifth estate that is not just a powerful potential, but as Burke said, of the fourth estate, a literal and momentous fact? Here I'd like to give you a glimpse of some of the evidence from studies at the OII and elsewhere that is identifying patterns of use of the internet which lend substance to the picture I'm painting today of the establishment of a fifth estate. I'll start with evidence from the particularly interesting area of the internet's growing impacts in everyday life. Then I'll move on to concrete developments in other arenas so that you can make sense of, that help you make sense of this concept I'm calling the fifth estate. In the area of internet life, the Oxford Internet Institute has one of Britain's most authoritative sources of information through what we call the Oxford Internet Surveys, which are conducted every 2 years since 2003 in face-to-face interviews across Britain. We interviewed over 2,000 individuals, 14 years old and over each year. And we can link this research with the findings of over 24 other nations in, I usually don't have to do this, in the World Internet Project, which is a consortium of other countries with similar projects. Let me briefly identify, and I won't go into a great deal of statistical information, but I will give you a great deal of statistical information as you leave the room. The Oxford Internet Survey report is available to you. So I will just touch on a few key findings. First, let me address the Passing Fad thesis. In 2000, when the OII was being conceived here at Oxford, the internet was used by about 1/3 of Britons, primarily used by, through dial-up access, low speed. Many speculated that the internet was a fad at that time, another CB radio phenomena. Now the resilience of the internet is clear, as 2/3 of Britons currently use it. It is neither a technological novelty nor as a new Luddite emerging trend, microtrend. However, this basic statistic does define a digital divide. I'd like to, a bit of a segue here to discuss the degree to which a digital divide may or may not be important. Many argue that what difference does it make if 1/3 do not use it or use it? There are many consumer items that people do not use, and it's not a social phenomenon. There are two arguments. One, well, first of all, that the internet use does follow socioeconomic divides in our society. In almost every country we look at, those who have internet access tend to be those of higher income, occupation, and educational background. So it does follow and reinforce social and economic divides. Still, we clearly argue, in fact, the OII has been on the, probably the lead in arguing that not all of the divide it can be owed to economic wherewithal, that many people simply choose not to use the internet. For example, only 1/3 of older people in Britain, people retired or retirement age, use the internet. You cannot explain that on the basis of socioeconomic factors alone. Many partners are in households where one partner chooses to use the internet and the other chooses not to. So there's choice as well as economic ability or disabilities. Does this divide, shaped by social and economic disparities or cultural choices, have significant consequences to societies. Should we worry about it? Is it simply another division of goods? To the degree that the internet plays a critical role by enabling social accountability through the creation of a fifth estate, we can dismiss the view that it is simply another consumer product. But what is particularly interesting about the fifth estate is that the internet has already achieved a critical mass, enabling networked individuals to become a significant force, even though there is a continuing digital divide. The existence of a fifth estate is not dependent on universal access. Not only has the internet diffused widely, but it has become increasingly central to everyday life over the past few years. It's become a place to meet. 20% of people in Britain meet new friends online. Many go on to meet them in person. It's become a place to go for entertainment. Broadband access has become the norm. Even to 2003 to 2005, 2005 to 2007, internet broadband access has skyrocketed. Now over 85% of people with internet access have broadband. That's well over half the households in Britain. Internet use once varied across households. You could see various gradations of how many days per week or how many times per month people use the internet. Now it seems to be that 75% of the people who use the internet use it daily. So what you find with increasing mobile access, with increasing Wi-Fi and mobility built in, you find that people who have the internet are increasingly integrating it into their everyday life, a daily experience in which they make it a part of their routine. It's becoming a critical infrastructure. But it is even more than that. It represents a space that is networking information and people in ways never before possible. Let me illustrate that by a key finding of our research, which is it is becoming the place to go for information. For example, Access asked internet users and non-users a series of questions about where would you go first, if you're looking for the name of your MP, if you're looking for information about taxes, about a local school, about the name of your MP. My colleague Helen Margetts developed this question. I thought, oh gosh, we can't ask this because there won't be a large enough percentage of people that would actually go first to the internet. Maybe we should say they go third or fourth to the internet. Well, now it's amazing. It has become, among internet users, the internet is the first place most people go for almost all of the items we ask about. Whether they are planning a trip, 77% will go to the internet first. Getting information about a book, 67%. Looking for a name of their MP, 64%, and so on. Another example of increasing centrality of the internet, we had a series of questions about how frequently you use the internet for 7 particular purposes. In every single case, between 2005 and 2007, the proportion of people who said that they frequently go to the internet for that purpose increased. The lowest increase was looking for information about sports. That only 56% said they looked for information online in 2007 compared to 54% in 2005. Well, it still does mean that a majority are looking for information about sports on the internet. But the greatest change, and this is very interesting to me, was finding information about health or medical care, where 68% of users in 2007 said that they used the internet to find health-related information. That's up from 37% in 2005. So as you can see, going to what Manuel Castells calls a new space of flows is becoming the first place to find information about matters both trivial and more serious, of everyday or once-in-a-lifetime needs. Importantly, users usually do not go to a particular place on the internet, but rely on search engines increasingly. So we asked people in 2005, 2007, would you primarily use a search engine, primarily go to places that you're familiar with, BBC Online, what have you? Dramatic change. In 2007, well over half said they would primarily use a search engine. That's up from 19% in 2005. So why is this important? Governments, libraries, Sarah, newspapers, universities, and other institutions are just beginning to realize that an increasing number of people are choosing not to come to them specifically for information, for example, but instead are going to a search engine on the internet. Now, a frequent response to this is to say that people will come to us, say the newspaper, because we are trusted. Well, we've found that internet users trust what they find on the internet about as much as they trust broadcast news. And in Britain, at least, more than they trust the newspapers. Generally, the more experience people have with the internet, the more they develop what I would call a learned level of trust. The more experience they have, the more they develop a learned level of trust. This extends not just to information they can find on the internet, but the people they can meet on the internet as well. So experience is key to developing trust in the internet. At any given level of experience, more educated people are more skeptical of what they can find on the internet, as they should be. Nobody expresses blind faith in the internet. But what we find is that people move to a learned level of trust as experience builds up. This will make the space of flows we call the internet even more the place to go for information over time as more people gain experience. You can see the basis of a fifth estate in these changing patterns of everyday internet use. But what I'd like to do is to also suggest that there are complementary patterns across various other institutional arenas. In all of these, existing institutional actors are trying to use the internet and web in various e-initiatives designed to enhance and reinforce the effectiveness of their operations and services. In each case, a key feature is that those involved in a sphere, such as media audiences or political constituencies, can go outside their respective institutional sphere to reach alternative sources of information and services over the internet. Let me explain with a few simple examples across a number of arenas. Let me begin with the press and mass media, as it is the fourth estate. Here, the internet has been criticized along two major dimensions critical to the functioning of democratic institutions. One criticism is that the individuals who use the internet to produce much online content are not professional journalists, but amateurs who are spewing misinformation or trivial non-information while marginalizing high-quality journalistic coverage. The other is that despite having an almost unlimited array of content at their fingertips, the users of the internet and web will choose to access only a narrow spectrum related to what most interests them. In the words of Cass Sunstein, users are cocooning themselves, creating echo chambers in which their own personal prejudices will be reinforced rather than challenged. This is in contrast to a perception of the mass media of bringing diverse audience to common text. I think these views ignore the degree to which all communication technologies are two-edged swords, with constructive and destructive cutting edges. For example, they dismiss some of the same weaknesses of the traditional mass media. In LA, the broadcast media used a cliche of if it bleeds, it leads, to decide what to cover. There's also often, and more importantly, an unjustified assumption that the internet will substitute for rather than complement traditional media. In very few cases have I heard the claim by internet users or information providers that they will be the substitute and wipe out the mass media. The press, from the newspapers to broadcast media, have been at the forefront of using online journalism to reach out to readers and viewers in many ways. About 30% of current internet users say they read an online newspaper or news service. So the internet is reinforcing and supporting traditional journalistic organizations. However, almost half of those who said in 2007 that they read the news online said that this was different from the newspaper they read offline. About 1/5 of internet users are reading news online that they do not read offline. The internet is therefore more realistically seen as becoming a source of news that in part complements the fourth estate. At the same time, citizen journalists, bloggers, researchers, politicians, government agencies, and more are putting information online that provides a related but independent source of news as a competing alternative to the fourth estate. For instance, the now famous Baghdad blogger helped to change the media agenda on the war in Iraq by using his enhanced communicative power to present to a worldwide audience a local Iraqi perspective that could not find a strong voice in the mainstream fourth estate, which then gave him a platform. In contrast, the press ignored a long, complex blog on the counterinsurgency in Iraq, which lent support to keeping coalition forces in Iraq for the time being. However, this became increasingly visible through a grassroots movement using email and other blogs. Parallel developments can be seen in the political arena. In campaigns, elections, and democratic politics, many still view the internet as largely irrelevant or marginal. Others argue that it is likely to undermine democratic institutions. Here are found the critics who view e-democracy primarily as an innovation that could erode traditional institutions of representative, deliberative democracy by providing the means for citizens to participate directly in public policy making. For example, the ability to gather and deliver signatures for online e-petitions to the UK Prime Minister has been dismissed by some as ineffectual, another supposed example of a minor technical novelty. Others worry that this initiative and other more direct forms of point-and-click democracy pose a real threat to deliberation and solid policy making. These fears raise genuine issues, but tend to conflate two very different institutional arenas. And I think this is important to cut out across all of these institutional arenas. One is an effort to use the internet and related ICTs to enhance existing democratic institutions and processes, such as voting, such as parliamentary consultation. This sees e-democracy as being focused primarily on supporting a more efficient and equitably managed democracy based on traditional representative processes. The other arena prioritizes the networking of individuals to enable the public to hold all institutions of government and politics more accountable. Critics are right to point out that most internet users do not seek information about politics or public policy through the internet, despite many e-democracy initiatives. For instance, 25% of internet users in Britain have signed a petition, but only 7% have signed one online. Less than 3% of internet users in Britain went online to contact a politician or political party or to donate money to join a civic organization. Only a small proportion of internet users employ the technology as a means for participating in politics. However, these statistics do not expose the degree to which the Fifth Estate's network of networks can enable political movements to be orchestrated among opinion leaders and political activists, all at internet time. This provides a novel means for holding politicians and mainstream institutions accountable through online interaction between ever-changing networks of individuals who form and reform continuously depending on the issue that is generating the particular network. A dramatic, perhaps the most dramatic example of this is the use of texting after the 11 March 2004 Madrid train bombings to alert people to anti-government rallies which challenged the government's claims and contributed to unseating the administration. In the UK, the number 10 Downing Street's e-petition site, the many signatures posted to the Prime Minister opposing the expansion of road charging schemes may not have changed policy, but it forced the government to reconsider and explain its case for moving ahead on this issue. The Fifth Estate it does not require huge majorities or universal access. The same patterns are clear again for citizen access to government. Many administrations have made major strides in putting public information and services online, even though they have not generally kept up with the commercial sector. In Britain, this means citizens and businesses can go online to complete tax returns, to apply and pay for local services, and more. Important initiatives to develop e-government services are gaining momentum. Ox has found that significantly more Britons, although still not a majority, have started to go online to the internet for information about local and central government. In public, private, and voluntary sectors, however, organizations must begin to understand that people will not necessarily go to their organization for the information or services they want, even when that organization is the responsible body. Go back to the 2/3 of internet users in Britain who go to the internet for health or medical related information. They're choosing this channel even if they might have been able to contact the NHS or a particular doctor or hospital about the matter. They go to the internet where they can search a network of information distributed around the world. When they see a doctor then, they come armed with sometimes ring binders full of information gathered online and all the questions that arose from their search. Government, business, NGOs, alongside individual users can contribute to this distributed information network, but it is becoming increasingly separate and independent from any single government, department, agency, NGO, business, or other entity. For those reasons, all organizations need to consider not only how they can reconfigure services in a way that they can be provided more efficiently online, they also need to identify what services and information they need to provide, taking account of what capabilities and resources they are best positioned to provide, and what information is provided well or maybe better by others, including over the internet. The Fifth Estate also has this crucial transformative potential in the workplace, in the business firm and other organizations. For instance, we're now undertaking a study with colleagues around the concept of distributed problem-solving networks. These are internet-enabled networks that come together to solve a problem, or which solve a variety of problems when they come together. Wikipedia, for instance, is an example of a distributed problem-solving network in which individuals distributed around the world contribute to creating text and resolving text differences. Open source software is another example. Open content film production and a variety of examples arise. In the health area, there are similar developments in gathering of health and medical information, such as a system entitled CERMO that enables doctors to answer as well as post questions to their fellow medical professionals in ways that generate information that's valuable enough for insurance and drug companies to track and pay for it. What's important to me about the notion of distributed, you can all remember in the early 1980s when corporations actually did not allow people to bring PCs into the office, but they did anyway, and because it enhanced their productivity and they were unstoppable. Today you find people, it's not a corporate policy to use distributed problem-solving networks, but you see programmers, physicians, individually choosing to join a distributed problem-solving network to enhance their own productivity, performance, or esteem. Some of you may not even need to understand what is going on in the university. We're all speaking here. I hesitate to talk about the developments underway in education and learning. But they provide another example of where, if you take simply universities building campus grids, digital library collections, and institutional repositories to maintain and enhance the productivity and competitiveness of the institution. So the networks can support the institutions per se. But academics are often more likely to go to an internet search engine before they go to their individual library first. There's likely to work with their network personal computer with colleagues far away than to work with their colleagues in the next office. And they're more likely to post their work on their websites and blogs rather than in institutional repositories. Universities have spent millions on systems to support collaboration, such as for multi-point video conferencing, the Access Grid being one example. But the heads of high-performance computing operations agree with me that literally Facebook, YouTube, privately accessible social networking sites over the internet offer tools for collaboration that are arguably more powerful than those available in academia. So even in academia, there's an emerging fifth estate, enabled by the internet, providing checks and balances on the more established academic institutional structures. As an individual academic, for example, I view myself as accountable to the faceless blogosphere of fellow academics as I do to the anonymous reviewers of my work submitted to journals, not to mention my colleagues in this room. Across many areas, the internet is becoming not only a new source of information, but also a platform for networking individuals in new internet-enabled groups that can challenge the influence of other, more established bases of institutional authority. It's not a utopian fantasy. Moreover, it is robust. As discussed, it can flourish despite a digital divide in access. It can be a significant force even though only a minority of users are actively producing material for the internet as opposed to simply using it. However, the role of the internet and of networked individuals is not uniformly positive. Problems persist with spammers, fraudsters, pornographers, bullies, terrorists, and more. Just as environmental or positive political movements can exploit the internet, so can extremist groups. Although these problems can be offset by a similarly long list of actual and hyped advantages enabled by the internet, the thrust of the critique remains, that the internet can empower the malicious in addition to the well-intentioned. This has led increasingly to calls from citizens, governments, business, and others to introduce online gatekeepers and other controls to govern what was originally conceived by the internet's designers as an open, end-to-end network with minimal central control, particularly in allowing a free flow of content. Policymakers and others concerned with fair and effective democratic governments will need to investigate how many relevant issues of internet governance can affect the future and vitality of the fifth estate. This includes topics that have become well understood in other estates, such as media ownership and concentration and protection of the rights of minorities. Freedom of expression is a critical aspect of a fifth estate role. This could require a right to anonymity, which is under threat by some initiatives, but not all, aimed at better authenticating the identity of users. The vitality of internet-enabled fifth estates rests less on policy initiatives, since it is already emerging, than on preventing over-regulation or inappropriate regulation of the internet. Questions about the governance of the fifth estate are likely to become more prominent as people realize that the internet is a social phenomenon with broad and substantial societal implications. Appropriate forms of governance and social and political processes, not just technical internet and infrastructure aspects, will be required to ensure public debate and accountability are enhanced in this network of networks, which encompasses a wide ecology of actors. Of course, the fifth estate could undermine institutions. It could impose an ideological consensus that could quash debate, or it could become a conservative force by establishing ever more checks and balances. An intriguing avenue to explore could be to seek to hold internet users more accountable through the development of innovative approaches to using the fifth estate, internet-enabled networks to regulate itself, such as seems to be developing through what some have called peer production of internet governance. In summary, my conceptualization of the Fifth Estate builds on the depiction by Manuel Castells of the internet as creating a space of flows, in contrast to a space of places. When you go to the internet, you enter this space of flows that connects with people and places. This is dramatically different from a physical place, such as this hall. Both are important. Both serve major social roles in shaping the quality of our information environment. They complement one another, such as in distributing the text of this lecture through the web. This space of flows enables a multitude of actors to reconfigure access to information, people, services, and technologies. In this space, they can reinforce existing institutions, such as when the press move into online journalism. They can also enable individuals to be at the center of their own personal network, as when a teenager collects thousands of musical recordings. However, they can also network individuals in ways that can provide an independent source of social accountability across multiple arenas of Fifth Estate. A key implication of this for society at large is that the internet can be used to increase the accountability of the other estates, for instance, by being used as a check on the press. It can also be deployed as an alternative source of authority and as a check on other established positions of authority, such as politicians, doctors, and academics, by offering alternative sources of information, analysis, and opinion to citizens, to patients, and to students. In conclusion, you may have noted that I have not pursued the argument that the growing centrality of this network of networks is enabling a new information society or a new network society. Instead, I'm making a far more modest and less controversial, but maybe less conventional claim that through the space of flows, the network of networks, the internet is enabling the development of a Fifth Estate that is enhancing the accountability of many sectors across all societies, from Burma to Britain, and from the press office to the classroom. These internet-enabled networks of the Fifth Estate need to be identified and better understood if they're to be protected and fostered in the coming decades as a means for realizing the growing potential of the internet. Thank you very much.